The cliffside road fell silent the moment the engine roared past the barrier. Frank Delgado heard the crash before he ever saw the smoke rising below. His hands trembled as he gripped the porch railing, refusing to believe it. That car was not just metal. It was 12 years of his late wife's memory. He had restored the 1967 Mustang piece by piece after returning home from war. Every weekend for over a decade, he poured his heart into that machine. Now it lay crumpled on the rocks. $200,000 turned to scrap. Sheila Crandall watched from her driveway with arms folded tightly. She had hated that car since the day Frank moved into Maplewood Estates. To her, a vintage car ruined her perfect image. She filed complaint after complaint, citing parking violations that barely made sense. Frank tried explaining his metals, his service. Sheila never listened. She simply smiled and stamped another violation notice each week. Neighbors whispered that she ran the HOA like her own personal kingdom. Anyone who disagreed with her quickly found fines stacked outside their front door. Frank had endured her harassment quietly, hoping the storm would eventually pass him by. But today, beyond what fines or threats could fix. His nephew worked HOA enforcement and handled aggressive towing requests personally. Dale had been ordered to remove the Mustang immediately under a new bylaw. Witnesses later said Dale climbed inside the car instead of using the tow hook. He claimed he only wanted to move it a few feet forward safely. Instead, tires screeched, and the car shot toward the cliff. Frank ran outside just in time to watch his life's work disappear forever. The Mustang flipped twice before crashing through the guardrail in a violent explosion. Smoke curled upward as horrified neighbors gathered. Phones raised, capturing every shocking second. Frank dropped to his knees, his breath catching somewhere between rage and heartbreak. Sheila barely flinched, more concerned about liability than the destruction unfolding before her. She turned to a stunned bystander and muttered something about insurance paperwork already. Her coldness ignited fury inside Frank that he had buried for entirely too long. He remembered every meeting where she mocked his metals, calling them decorative clutter. He remembered every fine taped to his door despite following every official rule. This was not an accident born from carelessness. This was years of cruelty culminating. Police arrived within minutes, sirens slicing through the quiet coastal afternoon air. Officers cordoned off the area while paramedics checked Dale for shock and injuries. Frank stood motionless, staring at the wreckage glittering faintly under the harsh sunlight. A young officer approached gently, asking him to describe exactly what had happened. Frank's voice cracked as he recounted years of harassment leading to this moment. Neighbors stepped forward immediately, eager to support his account with their own testimonies. One woman handed over months of video showing Sheila's relentless campaign against him. Another man revealed text messages where Sheila pressured Dale into towing it himself. The officer's expression hardened as the picture became disturbingly clear and undeniable. This was no innocent mistake. This looked like deliberate, reckless. Frank felt something shift inside him. Grief slowly transforming into fierce determination. He would not let this be buried under HOA paperwork and quiet apologies. He would not let Sheila Crandall walk away untouched after destroying everything he loved. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the broken guardrail, Frank decided. He would fight back. Not with violence, but with truth and unstoppable resolve. The following morning, he named Maria Ibarra. She specialized in property disputes but had never seen a case quite like this. Maria reviewed the videos, the finds, and without blinking. This was not just property damage. This looked like calculated abuse of power. She explained that Dale's reckless driving could fall under criminal endangerment charges easily. If proven deliberate, he could face up to 10 years behind bars. Frank's stomach tightened, unsure whether justice could really reach someone so protected. Sheila Crandall had connections throughout the community, including several local council members. She had spent years building an image of order, control. But Maria reminded him that surveillance footage rarely lied about the truth. Meanwhile, through every corner of the neighborhood, residents who once stayed silent suddenly found the courage to speak out loudly. A retired teacher named Carol Whitman shared her own years of HOA harassment. She had been fined repeatedly for a wheelchair ramp built for her disabled son. Sheila had called it an eyesore, demanding removal despite federal disability protections. Another family described relentless complaints about cultural decorations outside. Each story added another crack to Sheila's carefully constructed wall of intimidation. Frank realized he was not alone. He was simply the breaking point everyone needed. He organized a community meeting at the local church hall that weekend. Dozens of neighbors arrived, carrying folders, photos. Frank stood at the podium, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. He spoke about service, sacrifice, and the home he tried to build peacefully. He spoke about losing something irreplaceable because someone abused unchecked authority for years. Tears formed in several eyes as he described his wife's laughter inside that car. By the end of the meeting, residents had agreed to formally challenge the HOA. They filed a joint complaint demanding an independent investigation into Sheila's conduct immediately. Local news outlets picked up the story, drawn by the dramatic cliffside footage. Reporters arrived outside Maplewood Estates, cameras capturing the wreckage still visible below. Sheila refused interviews at first, hiding behind a public relations representative she hired. But pressure mounted as more residents shared documented abuse spanning several painful years. Detectives reopened the case, treating Dale's actions as more than a simple mistake. Forensic analysis of the Mustang revealed the brakes had never actually been engaged. Text messages between Sheila and Dale showed clear instructions to remove the car forcefully. One message read that Frank needed to learn his place inside their community. That message became the turning point prosecutors needed to build a stronger case. Maria filed criminal complaints alongside a civil lawsuit demanding compensation for damages suffered. Frank watched the investigation unfold with cautious hope mixed with lingering exhaustion. He visited the cliffside every evening, staring at the spot where everything changed. Sometimes he imagined his wife sitting beside him in the passenger seat again. Other times he simply wept, mourning years of unnecessary suffering at Sheila's hands. Despite his pain, something inside him refused to surrender to despair or silence. He thought of Carol's ramp, the immigrant family's decorations, every silenced neighbor before him. This fight was no longer just about a car or financial compensation alone. It was about reclaiming dignity stolen by someone who mistook authority for ownership. As the investigation deepened, Sheila grew increasingly desperate, scrambling to control the narrative. She accused Frank of exaggerating his service record to gain public sympathy unfairly. That accusation backfired spectacularly when veterans across the county rallied to his defense. Local veteran organizations confirmed his medals, his deployments, and his honorable discharge records. Public opinion shifted sharply, turning fierce sympathy toward Frank and outrage toward Sheila. The HOA board suspended Sheila pending the ongoing criminal investigation. For the first time in years, she felt the walls closing in around her. Frank, prepared to testify, determined to ensure justice finally reached its target. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Frank walked in wearing his old uniform jacket. Reporters lined the hallway, eager to capture the verdict everyone anticipated nervously. Dale sat beside his lawyer, visibly shaken, avoiding eye contact with the gallery. Sheila arrived separately, her confident posture replaced by stiff, anxious uncertainty now. Prosecutors presented the text messages, proving intent beyond reasonable doubt for the jury. They showed surveillance footage of Dale accelerating instead of braking near the cliff. An engineer testified that the brakes showed no signs of mechanical failure whatsoever. Maria methodically connected every harassment complaint to Sheila's documented pattern of retaliation. She presented testimony from Carol, the immigrant family, and a dozen other neighbors. Each story painted a portrait of cruelty disguised as community order and discipline. Frank took the stand, his voice steady despite years of suppressed grief surfacing. He described his wife, his service, beloved Mustang. He explained how Sheila's harassment had stripped away peace from his quiet retirement. The jury listened intently, several members visibly moved by his calm, dignified testimony. After 2 emotional days, the jury reached a verdict everyone had been waiting for. Dale was found guilty of criminal endangerment and reckless destruction of property. The judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison, citing deliberate, calculated negligence. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as reality finally caught up with consequence. Sheila, for harassment and conspiracy, watched her empire crumble instantly. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove her from any leadership position permanently. She was ordered to pay significant damages toward Frank's destroyed Mustang and emotional distress. Her once pristine reputation collapsed under the weight of years of documented abuse. Neighbors who once feared her now spoke freely, reclaiming their voices and dignity. Outside the courthouse, Frank stood surrounded by supporters holding handmade signs of gratitude. Carol hugged him tightly, thanking him for giving everyone the courage to speak. The Vietnamese family presented him with a small lantern symbolizing light after darkness. Frank smiled gently, feeling something heavy finally lift from his exhausted, grieving shoulders. Weeks later, ceremony honoring veterans within the neighborhood. They unveiled a modest plaque near the repaired guardrail overlooking the quiet cliffside. It read that courage and integrity could outlast even the harshest abuse of power. Frank donated part of his settlement toward building wheelchair ramps for disabled residents. He also funded scholarships for children whose families had once felt unwelcome there. Sheila watched from a distance as the community healed without her. Her name became a quiet warning whispered among future HOA board members nationwide. Dale's sentencing made headlines. sparking conversations about accountability within homeowner associations everywhere. Other neighborhoods began reviewing their own HOA policies. Fearing similar hidden abuses, Frank never replaced the Mustang, choosing instead to plant a garden near the cliff. Each flower represented a memory, a struggle. Visitors often stopped to read his story etched quietly onto a small stone marker. It reminded everyone that silence only empowers those who abuse their authority unchecked. Frank found peace not in revenge, but in restoring dignity to his entire community. His resilience inspired others to stand firm against unchecked power wherever it appeared. Justice had finally arrived with undeniable, unwavering The cliffside that once witnessed destruction now stood as a symbol of renewal. And every sunset over Maplewood Estates carried a quiet promise of hard-won freedom.